problem was I wouldn't say it.
Very difficult and obvious question. What is sustainable aviation for you?
Well, let's start this way. Let's start with the word sustainable. It's a buzzword, okay? It's a buzzword. Everybody's using it. It's trendy, it's inflated, it's misused, overused, it creates a hype. It's fake, it's not meaningless, okay? I'm not saying that it's meaningless, but it's very vague. And you know, it's very deceptive in marketing. They use it for greenwashing. Everything is sustainable. If you don't know anything else, instead of the word good, just say sustainable. Okay, so we're going to live in sustainable houses, we're going to sleep in sustainable beds so that you have a sustainable sleep, and so on. Everything, you know, come on, geez.
The problem is that sometimes I have an impression that when we talk about sustainable aviation, it's not the same for everyone involved in the discussion. So the first step would be to understand what is sustainable aviation, and do we talk about the same thing, or each of us is, seeing it a different way?
I think that all of them can agree on one thing, and especially related to aviation. It's less pollution, less noise pollution, and less air pollution. That's where they probably all agree on. You know, that would be the goal. How they get to it, then, you know, you get the different manufacturers say different things in the airports or whatever. You know, they all have their own vision of what sustainability is. I mean, if they have a common goal, there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. Yeah, but, you know, use the right words in the right context.
The problem is that we can say we have the common goal, but many of industry actors are telling that the roadmap is not really clear.
No.
Some vision and declaration where we're going. We have that there is no step-by-step movement or there is not a roadmap. It's not existing.
It's very difficult because you have so many interests and you're only talking about the industry. You know, you got on the other hand, you get environmentalists. You know, there's three elements to sustainability, okay? One is people, the next thing is planet, and the third thing is profit, okay? So basically it's societal, it's environmental, and it's economic, okay? Now try to bring these three things together. It's difficult. It's difficult.
It's difficult, and more I'm talking to industry actors, more I understand that it's really difficult, and we're missing something. We're not talking all together. What about your perception of future technology? A lot of guys are working on hydrogen, electric, hybrid aircraft. In your opinion, what would be the first to go sustainable?
Well, I'm not a chemist, okay? And I'm not a physicist. I'm a communicator, so
have decades of
my words.
In aviation, sometimes it's even better.
But if you just take the word hydrogen, okay, it's not an innovation. It exists for as long as the planet exists, there's hydrogen. It's a chemical element, okay? It's just a matter of how can you use it? How can you acquire it and make it usable, okay? But, you know, there's Paracelsus, there was a physicist in the 1600s, an alchemist. He was already experimenting with hydrogen. So it's not something to say, oh, you know, we got this new laboratory, and we're doing hydrogen, we're doing something innovative. No, you're not doing something innovative. You're just picking up an old thing and make it new again. And why? There's two reasons. There's probably money to be made, you know, new industry, new engines, new airplanes and so on. So everything has to be, you know, new investments, and you can make money, you can make profit. So that helps.
So which one would be the first? Hybrid, electrical aircraft? Let's say if we talk about Caribbean, what would be a good help for getting sustainable, and in the same time have connections and connectivity, which is not really on top yet.
Basically, yes, the Caribbean wants it, needs it, and should have it. Okay, there's no doubt about it. There's nothing vague about that. How it's going to be done and what kind of airplanes, the big airliners, the transatlantic airliners, they're going to not change that fast. Yeah, but if you take the let's call them the island hoppers, the smaller ones, 9-seaters or whatever, 15-seaters or so, there it's easier to change the engines and it needs less because the airplane is smaller, and so for the big airliners you need tanks for your fuel. Hydrogen tanks are bigger, so they have to change airplanes. Okay, you also have to think of safety and security. I mean, it's not the same as fossil fuel. We got used to that. We got used to everything. That's why we like it and keep on doing it, because we don't have to reinvest. So we just keep on sticking to fossil fuel. Well, I don't want to say it's over now, but people are thinking differently. They have different expectations now. So they think of hydrogen, they think of electrical, which is all good. Where it could be applied first, it can be dependent on geographical region. Like I said, the Caribbean is different than if you take the global environment, because we're smaller, we use smaller airplanes. And if you have smaller airplanes, it's much easier to make the changes.
Simple question. In your part of the world, do people, are they worried about airport impact on the nature all around? Due to the climate, you don't have that much de-icing issues, so the de-icing liquids are not that much present in the airport, but still water problems around the airport. Is it something people are worried about, or let's say it's not that important yet?
Well, I don't want to comment on the attitude in the Caribbean and what's used there. Basically, yes, they want a clean environment for sure, and they certainly, if you think about tourism, which is 85% of the economy, the revenues of the economy, they want to be clean. They want to have a nice environment, no doubt about it. Okay, how people view it, it's very difficult because the Caribbean is no different than the rest of the world. Okay, academics talk in a certain way. Okay, people who are poorly educated, they talk in a totally different way. They don't even understand what it's all about. You say what's sustainable, you say what? What's that? Yeah. So it all depends on what you're saying, how you're saying it, whether it's understood, and if people understood it, at least they're willing to accept it. Okay. Now, in how far it can go to implementation, that's a different story. Maybe a matter of economics.
The question which is very important for me, do you think that aviation business is pointed as a bad guys or bad industry? Is it right or is it totally wrong? Because we are not responsible for that much of CO2 emissions, but the image we're getting is not something good.
Well, the image may be bad, but if you look at the figures, basically the carbon pollution from aviation globally is about 2.5 to 3% of all of it. Okay, so it's very little. So don't say just forget about it. I mean, road transportation. So there's also a lot of pollution now in road transportation. They're changing cars to electrical and so on. So that's getting better. That means percentage-wise, all of a sudden that number in aviation goes up. Yeah, so it's changing all the time. But it has to be done, even if it's 3%, it still has to be done. But it's so difficult. You can say, well, use only what you need, okay? Like primitive cultures. They used only things to survive, not to thrive, okay? They didn't have tourism. Yeah, they just lived, they harvested, they hunted, they only took what they needed and left nature, the way it was. That's not what people are doing right now. Geez, look behind you. Look at the buildings behind you. That's how people live now. Before they lived in caves, they went out of the cave with a spear or a bow and arrow and just got what they needed, and that's it. That's good enough for the day. Yeah. Or go fishing. Yeah. Think about sustainability and what's the most sustainable way of flying? It's what a bird does. It flies. It flies. Yeah. And yeah, well, there's some exhaust or droppings. Okay, and you can use those as a fertilizer. It's the most sustainable way of flying. Yeah. Now, of course, you cannot have airplanes with flattering wings or so. I understand that. But we have to learn from nature how that works, and then start. I don't want to say imitating, but just to do what nature does and do how nature works. Okay, then you get closer to things.
What would you see as the easiest way to proceed in a smart way with sustainable aviation without damaging what we did right and trying to get better or faster in reducing emissions and at the same time not destroying the industry?
Well, the one thing is reducing the emission is okay, sure. It's one thing, it's an important thing, yeah. But then on the other hand, there's totally increased air traffic, okay? So on the one hand, you reduce it on the one side, on the other hand, it goes up on the other side, okay? Now you have to balance that out. If you want to forget about the emission, then stop tourism. Don't fly anymore. No airplanes with passengers, okay? Well, nobody wants that. It's not going to work. Okay, so that's. But and you don't want to say have less of them. No, say that. So you have to do indeed something about your airplanes or the routes or whatever to make it better. That's understandable. It's also acceptable. So the problem is, how long is this all going to take? Okay, long term, maybe not at all, not totally at all global. Okay, short term, there's going to be some improvements, and that's good because they are working on it. I mean, manufacturers and airports, they try to do whatever they can, and that's good. Everybody has to try whatever he can, individuals, industry, or whoever. And if you put it all together, then things work. But how long does it take? Short term, well, we may see some good results in 5 years. Okay, long term, you see better things. 10 years, maybe 20 years. Okay. So it is happening, but it's slowly. And you cannot say, well, we're going to set sustainable goals for 2025. Okay. Well, come on, that's just a bunch of nonsense. You cannot do that. You cannot even tell how good your business is in 2025. 5-year plan. You have to adjust it all the time. Then you have a crisis here, crisis there. So don't come with those things. We have a 5-year goal. We have a goal that we're going to do it, and that's it. And when we're going to work hard on it as fast as possible. But don't come up with all these numbers or so. It's like forecasting, and it doesn't.
That's the point, because we have the plan, declaration and vision for 2035, and then the achieving net zero for 2050. So.
You're going to achieve net zero, okay? You have 10,000 of aircrafts, okay? The DC-3 that was built before the war, okay? There's still 130 or 160 flying, okay? Are you going to change that? Yeah, because they're so darn good, they still use them, okay? And that's with a lot of these airplanes. A lot of airplanes are 60 years old. They're 30 years old. Are you going to change that immediately? Say, hey, throw them away, put it in the garbage and just get a new one, okay? Invest I don't know how many millions. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So it has to go slowly. And if everybody makes a sincere effort, then it works. But put a time on it, that's hard.
We have to be patient, and sometimes I'm telling that we have to be patient. We have to work on the improvements. It's obvious, but in the same time, we have to make the industry better without cutting jobs, without hurting, because the industry comes out after COVID, which is financially for aviation, it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster.
See it the way you want it. Any executive or so who uses the word sustainable, or any other, or environmentalist, or anybody else who uses the word sustainable, we'd say just put your money where your mouth is. Okay, do something about it, everybody. And don't just talk about it. I mean, there's summits all over. Leaders of countries and so they get together and they talk about things and they all agree and they come out with a nice press release that they agree, and then they go home and very little happens. And that's the wrong thing. It's really put your money where your mouth is. If you believe in it, then do it and prove it. And I could almost say we have to keep you accountable. We have to have you accountable that you're actually doing, rather than just talking about it.
It's not happening always like that.
Well, it's nothing new. It happens with other things too. That's not just sustainability.
My last question: do we need to educate people and explain what exactly we want from that something sustainable to get better understanding? Because as you said, sustainable for one person, it means one thing. For 10 different person, it will be slightly different.
You call it education, but basically it's resetting their mind. Okay, now they have their mind in a certain way, and it's now resetting. And if you talk about education, people usually think about younger people. It's okay, do it in school, and so yes, start early with it. But basically, for adults, older people, and so on, you have to reset their mind.
How?
Well, some education, a lot of information, but especially they need to know. Basically everybody is looking at it from what's in it for me. So if you can tell it in a way, if you do this and that, it's going to be better. It's not just for the environment, it's also for your industry, your economy, or whatever. So it's a different kind of education. It's information. If they're not informed about it, their mindset is still the same old thing, and they keep on doing what they've been doing before. Yeah.
So, in fact, industry, whatever it is, aviation or a different industry, has to make some efforts in order to communicate better and to educate better and to explain what exactly is happening, where we are going, and what changes it would bring to the society, to the business people. I mean, we are back to communication.
Yeah, basically, it's all about communication. Not talk about it, but just communicate right. I don't want to say talk, You have to communicate right, use the right words, and you have to use the right words for the right audience. I think I said before, if you talk to people in the economy, you talk differently, you tell them a different story than environmentalists. Okay, maybe a totally different story, but at the end, it all comes together at what's the goal. That's how we have to work. But then in the different directions for different audience, communicate in a different way, say different things, but basically, essentially, the same meaning behind it. Okay? And then try to convince them. So you have to get to their mind and give them a message that sticks in their mind, and then they say, "Huh, that makes sense. I'm going to do it." Because there's something in it for me. I'm going to live longer, or it's good for my children, or whatever.
Perfect. Thank you. I will deal with all that, and you will become a Hollywood star.